Lee. When you meet people, you often see only the surface, the smile, the handshake, the casual conversation that gives you just a glimpse of who they are. But every once in a while, Lee, you encounter someone who carries a different kind of weight, a different kind of presence. It's subtle, almost unspoken, yet it's unmistakable. These people don't announce themselves loudly. They don't seek pity, and they don't tell you their whole story right away. Instead, you notice it in the pauses, in the way they look at the world, in the way they carry themselves. That's because they've been through hell and back, and those journeys leave traces, not obvious scars on the outside, but tiny signs etched into their character. Hell is not always fire and brimstone, Lee. Hell can be the years of silent struggle that nobody noticed. Hell can be betrayal by someone you trusted most. It can be the loss that ripped you apart, Lee. The nights when you begged for relief, or the days when you couldn't see a reason to go on. It is loneliness, it is despair, it is failure, it is rejection, it is grief. It is the slow unraveling of everything you thought was secure. And yet, when people crawl out of that pit, when they somehow refuse to stay broken, they come back differently. They come back deeper, sharper, wiser, more alive than those who never had to fight for their survival. But here's the paradox, Lee. The people who have suffered most often try the hardest not to burden others with their suffering. They don't want attention. They don't want pity. They want to live. They want to keep moving. They want to make sure that the darkness they carry does not spill onto the people around them. And so, the evidence of their survival doesn't show up in dramatic declarations. It shows up in tiny, almost invisible signs that most people miss unless they look closely. You might notice, for example, how someone listens to you more carefully than anyone else ever has. They aren't just waiting for their turn to talk. They are listening with their whole soul. Why, Clee? Because they know how it feels to be unheard, dismissed, or forgotten. Or you might notice that when life throws chaos at them, they don't panic the way others do, Clee. They don't crumble at small setbacks because they have already been to places much darker, much harsher, and survived worse storms than you could imagine, Lee. These people radiate a kind of quiet strength. Not the strength that beats its chest or shouts for recognition, but the kind that simply refuses to be crushed again. Their strength isn't built on arrogance, it's built on endurance. It's built on knowing that even in your weakest moment, even when you are abandoned, even when you are crawling in the dirt with nothing left, you can still choose to rise. And when someone has lived through that choice, when they've faced that moment and come out alive, they never forget it. There's another thing you notice. They carry compassion in a way that feels rare. They don't mock weakness. They don't dismiss other people's pain. Like they don't belittle struggles that may seem small compared to their own. Instead, they lean in with empathy, with a kind of patience that only comes from someone who has been there. They have seen how fragile life can be, and because of that, they choose kindness where others choose cruelty. But do not mistake them for fragile. Their kindness is not weakness. Their gentleness is not naivety. In fact, those who have suffered the deepest often carry within them an unshakable edge. They've been betrayed, so they recognize dishonesty quickly. They've been abandoned, so they do not beg for love. They've been humiliated, so they carry themselves with quiet dignity. They don't need to prove themselves anymore. Lee, they have already been tested in fire, and they know exactly who they are. The truth is, you can't fake this kind of depth, Lee. You can't pretend to have gone through hell and carry the lessons without having bled for them. And that's what makes these signs so powerful. They aren't rehearsed, Lee. They aren't learned from a book or copied from someone else. They are carved into the soul through experience, real, raw, brutal experience. When we talk about teeny signs, we're not talking about grand gestures or visible scars. We're talking about subtle things that reveal how a person's inner world has been transformed. It might be the way they pause before answering because they've learned the cost of careless words. It might be the way they encourage others to keep going because they know how precious encouragement is when you're in the dark. It might be the way they don't waste time on trivial arguments because they've learned that life is too short to fight over nonsense. And that's the real gift of people who have suffered perspective. Once you've been through hell, you stop being rattled by small inconveniences. You stop making mountains out of molehills. You stop getting offended by things that don't matter. Your perspective sharpens, your gratitude deepens, and your life becomes less about appearances and more about truth. This introduction is not meant to glorify suffering. Nobody should wish for trauma, and nobody should romanticize pain. But the reality is that suffering is part of life, and those who have endured it, those who have faced it without being completely consumed, are often the ones who shine a light for the rest of us. They become living proof that human beings can withstand unimaginable darkness and still return with light in their eyes. So when you encounter someone with that quiet depth, that calm in the storm, that compassion that feels real, pay attention. Don't just brush it off as personality or coincidence. Look deeper, because chances are you are in the presence of someone who has been to hell and back. And if you learn to recognize the tiny signs, you'll begin to see how the human spirit is capable of breaking, rebuilding, and becoming stronger than ever before. One of the first tiny signs that someone has been through hell and back is the way they pause before they speak. To most people, it might look like hesitation, but to those who understand, it is something much deeper. That pause is not because they are unsure of what they want to say, but because they have learned through painful experience how much weight words can carry. They know how words can wound, how they can build or destroy, and so they take a moment to measure theirs carefully. It is not just silence, it is restraint, the kind of restraint that comes from someone who has seen the consequences of thoughtless expression. They are not interested in being right at the expense of someone's dignity. They are not interested in winning arguments by cutting someone down. Instead, they want their words to add meaning, to carry honesty without cruelty, to be deliberate rather than reckless. This small pause also shows a level of self-control that is hard-earned. People who have been through real suffering have already been provoked, misunderstood, and misjudged countless times. They have seen how easy it is for conversations to turn into conflict, and so they choose to speak with intention. That calm moment before they answer is their way of making sure they don't add unnecessary chaos to the world. And beneath that pause lies another truth. They have learned that silence itself can be powerful. Silence can disarm, it can protect, and sometimes it speaks louder than anything else. When you notice someone who doesn't rush to fill every gap with noise, but instead embraces that small moment before speaking, you are likely looking at someone whose strength was forged in suffering and who now carries wisdom in the spaces between their words. Another small sign that someone has been through hell and back is the calmness they display in the middle of chaos. Where most people panic, overreact, or get overwhelmed by sudden challenges, they remain steady, almost unshaken. This calm is not natural. It was earned. It comes from surviving storms that once felt unbearable, from living through nights where everything seemed to be falling apart and there was no way forward. Having endured those moments, they have developed a perspective that most people never touch. When new difficulties arise, they instinctively compare them to what they have already endured. And very often, the present struggle feels small in comparison. This steadiness is not indifference. They feel they care, they react, but they do so from a place of control rather than fear. The storms they faced before taught them that panic never solves problems, that chaos feeds on more chaos, and that the only way to move through pain is to stay grounded. That is why their presence feels different in a crisis. When everyone else loses composure, they anchor themselves. When others fall apart, they find a way to hold steady. People who haven't faced deep suffering sometimes mistake this calm for coldness, but in reality it is the opposite. It is compassion expressed as stability. They know others need reassurance, and they know that one calm presence can stop a situation from collapsing completely. Their peace is not nair and vie. It is tested. It is not ignorance. It is wisdom. And when you see someone who stands firm in storms that would shake anyone else, you are often looking at a survivor of hidden battles, someone whose strength was carved in the fire of their darkest days. Another tiny sign that someone has been through hell and back is the way they show compassion without judgment. When you speak to them about your struggles, they don't rush to dismiss your feelings or tell you to get over it. Instead, they listen with patience, and there's a softness in their response that makes you feel safe. This comes from knowing firsthand what it feels like to be dismissed, ignored, likely, or made to feel small when you were already breaking inside. They remember the weight of that loneliness, and because of it, they refuse to make others feel the same. Their compassion is not pity. They don't see you as weak for struggling. On the contrary, they recognize the courage it takes to admit pain. Their empathy doesn't come from theory, it comes from experience. They know the kind of nights that feel endless, the kind of pain that isolates you, the kind of thoughts you are afraid to voice out loudly. That knowledge shapes the way they respond to others. Instead of offering shallow encouragement, they offer presence. Instead of quick fixes, they offer understanding. This attitude also makes them slower to criticize. They don't look at others and say, "I would never make that mistake," because they know suffering has a way of humbling even the strongest. They understand that everyone carries invisible battles, and so they extend kindness where others extend judgment. It's a compassion that feels rare in this world because it's real, it's earned, and it's rooted in survival. When you encounter someone who consistently gives understanding rather than condemnation, who instinctively leans toward mercy instead of harshness, you're likely seeing the quiet mark of someone who has been through hell and come back with their heart still intact. Another subtle sign that someone has been through hell and back is their ability to find gratitude in the smallest things. For most people, gratitude is tied to big victories or obvious blessings, but for those who have walked through deep suffering, gratitude becomes something entirely different. They have lived through days where even getting out of bed felt impossible, where every breath was a fight and where hope seemed absent. Because of that, when life finally gives them even the smallest relief, they don't take it for granted. A simple meal, a quiet evening, a smile from a friend, or even just the fact that they made it through another day, these are no longer ordinary moments to them. They are gifts. This perspective shifts their entire outlook. Instead of constantly chasing what they don't have, they find strength in appreciating what is already there. Their gratitude is not shallow, it's rooted in survival. When you've been at rock bottom, when you've felt everything collapse, the smallest spark of light feels powerful. That's why people who've endured suffering often carry a kind of quiet joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. It's not loud or showy, but it's there in the way they smile, in the way they acknowledge the present moment, in the way they don't overlook blessings that others rush past. This deep gratitude also protects them from bitterness. They know how easy it is to let pain harden your heart, but they've chosen another way. Instead of letting their suffering turn them cold, they've allowed it to open their eyes to the beauty that still exists. They know life can be harsh, but they also know it can be breathtakingly kind in fleeting, unexpected ways. And because of this, they cherish what others might call ordinary. When you encounter someone who thanks life for the little things, who doesn't overlook details like laughter, warmth, or small acts of kindness, you're seeing evidence of someone who has been refined by hardship. Their gratitude isn't naïve, it's hard-earned. It comes from knowing how fragile everything can be and how precious it is when something good, however small, enters your life. This ability to find meaning in simplicity is one of the clearest signs that a person has endured suffering and still managed to return with their soul intact. Another small but powerful sign that someone has been through hell and back is the way they set boundaries without apology. People who have endured deep suffering know what it feels like to be taken advantage of, manipulated, or drained by others. They've experienced situations where their kindness was exploited, where their trust was broken, and where their silence was mistaken for weakness. Out of that pain, they learned something critical. Survival depends on knowing when to say no, when to walk away, and when to protect their peace. Unlike those who have never faced such experiences, they no longer feel guilty about setting limits. They do not confuse boundaries with cruelty, nor do they allow others to make them feel selfish for protecting themselves. They understand that boundaries are not walls meant to keep love out, but doors meant to keep destruction from entering. And so, when you watch someone calmly refuse to be drawn into toxic behavior, when you notice how they can detach from harmful situations without unnecessary explanation, you are likely seeing the quiet wisdom of someone who has fought hard battles and refuses to return to them. This firmness does not make them cold, it makes them clear. They can still be warm, compassionate, and generous, but not at the expense of their own well-being. They have realized that without self-respect, every act of giving becomes hollow. They know that you cannot pour endlessly into others while being emptied yourself. Because of this, their boundaries are not only for protection, they are for balance. They want to give, but only in places where giving does not destroy them. What makes their boundaries so remarkable is the calm confidence with which they enforce them. They don't shout, they don't threaten, they don't need to prove a point. Their past has already taught them the cost of ignoring their own needs, and they are unwilling to pay that price again. This quiet strength can surprise those who expect compliance, but it commands respect. When you meet someone who can say no with grace, who knows when to step away without guilt, and who values their peace as much as their compassion, you are seeing another clear sign of a soul that has endured hell and come back wiser, stronger, and unwilling to be broken in the same way twice. Another tiny sign that someone has been through hell and back is the way they value honesty above everything else. When a person has endured betrayal, manipulation, or deception, they come to understand how destructive lies can be. They know what it feels like to have their trust shattered, to realize that words they believed in were empty, and to carry the weight of disappointment when people revealed themselves to be false. Because of this, they no longer play games with truth. They prefer honesty, even when it's painful, over comfort built on illusion. You'll notice it in their conversations. They don't exaggerate to impress, they don't promise what they can't deliver, and they don't flatter just to gain favor. Their words carry a straightforwardness that can feel real refreshing in a world full of pretense. They would rather risk conflict by being truthful than create false peace by hiding what they mean. This doesn't mean they are harsh. It means they respect honesty as a foundation for trust. Their commitment to truth also makes them perceptive. Having lived through deception, they recognize it quickly in others. They can sense inconsistency in tone, in actions, in words, and they quietly distance themselves when they see dishonesty. It's not that they are cynical, it's that they've learned the hard way how costly it is to ignore those signs. When someone speaks with clarity, avoids unnecessary masks, and values truth even when it's uncomfortable, you are often seeing the resilience of a person who has endured hell. They don't need illusions anymore. They know that authenticity, however difficult, is the only ground strong enough to rebuild a life after everything has fallen apart. Another sign that someone has been through hell and back is their ability to walk alone without fear. Most people cling desperately to groups, relationships, or constant validation because solitude feels unbearable. But those who have endured real suffering have already faced some of their darkest hours in isolation. They've experienced nights when no one answered the phone, days when support was absent, and moments when they had to carry themselves forward with nothing but their own will. That kind of loneliness changes you. It strips away illusions about dependence, and it forces you to discover a deeper strength within yourself. When you see someone who is comfortable being alone, who doesn't rush to fill silence with noise or chase people just to avoid emptiness, you are often seeing the strength of a survivor. They don't mistake solitude for weakness because they have learned it can be a place of clarity. They know that being alone is not the same as being broken. In fact, they have used that space to rebuild themselves, to think deeply, to heal in ways that constant distraction would never allow. This independence also makes them more intentional with their relationships. They don't cling to people out of fear of loneliness, nor do they tolerate toxic company just to avoid being by themselves. Their time alone has taught them to value quality over quantity. If they invite someone into their life, it's because they truly want them there, not because they need them to fill a void. That makes their connections stronger, purer, and more meaningful. Their comfort in solitude also gives them a quiet confidence. They don't need the constant noise of approval to feel secure. They don't fear silence. They don't chase validation. They have already stood in the darkest places alone and survived. That survival becomes a shield, one that allows them to move through the world with independence that others often mistake for coldness. But it isn't coldness, it's strength. When you meet someone who can stand alone, who carries themselves with ease even without constant company, and who values peace over forced companionship, you're seeing the unmistakable sign of a person who has endured hell and discovered that even in solitude, they are more than enough. Another small sign that someone has been through hell and back is the depth in their eyes. You can often sense it without words. The quiet heaviness, the weight of things they've seen, the silent battles they've fought. Their eyes don't just look at you, they look through you, as if they're searching for truth beneath the surface. It's not the empty stare of someone broken, but the steady gaze of someone who has faced darkness and come back with clarity. There's a reason people say the eyes are windows to the soul. For those who have suffered, their eyes carry both pain and wisdom. They may look tired, but they also carry kindness. They may seem distant at times, but when they focus on you, it feels as though they see more than you've spoken. This isn't imagination, it's experience. They've been forced to read people carefully, to notice subtle details, to sense when words and intentions don't match. That survival instinct remains in their gaze, making them deeply perceptive. But their eyes don't only reflect hardship, they also reflect resilience. You'll often notice a quiet fire, a kind of unspoken strength, as if life tried to crush them, but couldn't extinguish the light completely. That combination of pain and endurance creates an intensity that is unmistakable. When you meet someone whose eyes feel like they hold stories untold, when you sense both sorrow and strength woven together in a single glance, you are witnessing one of the clearest signs of a soul that has been through hell and come back transformed. Their gaze is not ordinary. It is the silent testimony of survival, the kind that doesn't need words to make you pause and realize there is something extraordinary in front of you. Another sign that someone has been through hell and back is their patience with life. While many people grow restless when things don't go their way immediately, survivors of deep suffering have learned that time moves differently when you're enduring pain. They know what it feels like to wait for healing that doesn't come overnight, to hope for relief that only arrives slowly, and to rebuild pieces of themselves day by day. That long and painful process teaches them that rushing rarely works, and that some things cannot be forced. They must unfold in their own season. This patience shows in the way they handle setbacks. Where others may give up quickly or explode in frustration, they take a deep breath and move forward steadily. They've learned that endurance, not speed, is what gets you through the darkest times. Because of this, they don't get easily rattled by delays, obstacles, or temporary failures. They understand that life is not about instant results, but about persistence. Their patience also makes them more understanding toward people. They don't demand perfection, nor do they expect others to have everything figured out. They recognize that everyone is on their own journey, and they allow space for mistakes, growth, and struggle. This makes them gentle in their expectations and slow to anger. When you meet someone who can wait without bitterness, who can keep moving forward without demanding that everything happen right now, you're seeing the quiet wisdom of someone who has been tested by suffering. Their patience is not laziness, it's strength. It is the strength of someone who has walked through fire and discovered that true transformation takes time, and that sometimes survival itself is the greatest victory of all. Another sign that someone has been through hell and back is their refusal to waste energy on meaningless conflict. When you've lived through real battles, the kind that break you to your core, you no longer feel the need to argue about every little thing. Survivors of deep pain have already fought wars within themselves, and because of that, they recognize how pointless most external conflicts are. They don't jump into debates just to prove they're right. They don't escalate petty disagreements, and they don't cling to pride in conversations that don't matter. Instead, they choose peace whenever they can because they know how exhausting real war feels, and they don't want to carry unnecessary battles anymore. This doesn't mean they are passive or weak. On the contrary, they know exactly when to fight and when to walk away. Their past has taught them that not every hill is worth dying on. Not every insult deserves a response, and not every confrontation needs to be pursued. They conserve their energy for what truly matters, protecting their dignity, defending what is right, and standing firm when something of real value is at stake. Their refusal to engage in meaningless conflict is also rooted in wisdom. They know how quickly small arguments can steal peace, waste time, and damage relationships. Having already experienced how heavy real suffering is, they no longer allow trivial issues to weigh them down. This makes them calmer, more focused, and surprisingly strong in situations where others would get lost in anger. When you see someone who lets go of the need to always win, who prioritizes inner peace over constant battles, you are seeing the mark of a person who has endured hell and emerged with clarity. They fight less, but when they do, it's with purpose. Another sign that someone has been through hell and back is the quiet confidence they carry. It isn't loud, it isn't boastful, and it doesn't need to be announced. It's the kind of confidence that comes from knowing they have already faced some of the worst moments life can offer and survived. They no longer feel the need to prove themselves to everyone because they understand that true strength doesn't need validation. Their self-assurance comes from endurance, from realizing that if they could withstand their darkest days, then they can handle whatever comes next. This confidence shows in subtle ways. It's in the way they walk into a room without demanding attention, yet their presence is felt. It's in the way they speak with calm certainty without trying to dominate or impress. It's in the way they handle challenges with quiet determination instead of panic. They don't need to control everything because they've already learned that control is an illusion. Instead, they trust their ability to adapt, to endure, and to rebuild if necessary. What makes this confidence so powerful is its humility. They don't look down on others or make comparisons to feel secure. Their strength isn't rooted in ego, but in resilience. They know they can stand alone if they must, but they also know how to appreciate genuine connection without clinging to it out of fear. When you see someone who carries themselves with steady assurance, who doesn't brag, who doesn't seek applause, but who simply moves with the quiet power of survival, you're witnessing the final sign of someone who has been through hell and come back transformed. Their confidence is not arrogance. It's proof that nothing, not even their darkest trials, could break them completely. And if this message spoke to you, remember, you are not alone in your journey. Strength is often born in silence, and wisdom is shaped through the battles you've endured. If you found value in these words, make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Your support helps this community grow, and together we can continue to spread hope, resilience, and strength. Stay strong and stay inspired.